The morning you hear about a law change is never just another day. Imagine reading that in less than 2 weeks, Virginia is enacting a gun law that could redefine how you own and carry firearms, and suddenly you feel the weight of urgency pressing down. This isn't just political talk. This is about your home, your family, and your personal safety. For anyone who has responsibly exercised their Second Amendment rights, this is a moment where awareness isn't optional. It's essential. Every decision you make, from leaving your house to securing your firearms, may now carry new legal consequences. But here's the question I want you to answer in the comments below. Do you feel this new law protects citizens, or does it create legal risks for responsible gun owners? I want you to be honest, because understanding public perception is key to this discussion. The law in question isn't just a minor update. It fundamentally adjusts where firearms can be legally carried, the circumstances in which they can be possessed, and potentially how authorities may interact with lawful gun owners. In my legal analysis, this law raises immediate concerns about both practical compliance and the broader impact on daily life. The language of legislation can be precise yet opaque, meaning that even the most diligent citizens may unintentionally find themselves in conflict with its requirements. Historically, Virginia has balanced gun rights with public safety. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms, but courts have repeatedly affirmed that reasonable regulations, like licensing requirements and restrictions in sensitive areas, are constitutionally permissible. Supreme Court precedent, including Heller and McDonald, establishes that while personal ownership is protected, states retain the authority to enact rules addressing public safety. My perspective is that this law pushes the envelope in a way that could test the limits of both state authority and individual rights. Constitutionally, the implications are significant. The Fourth Amendment, protecting against unreasonable searches and seizures, may intersect with enforcement practices under the new law. Homeowners must now carefully consider how law enforcement may approach inspections or compliance checks, and what constitutional safeguards remain. In my view, understanding these intersections is crucial for every responsible gun owner who values both personal security and legal compliance. In practice, the consequences of non-compliance could be severe. Penalties may include fines, license revocations, or criminal charges, even for those who have never posed a threat. In my analysis, the real-world impact is immediate. Lawful citizens must now reevaluate how they store, transport, and manage firearms in a way that aligns fully with state regulations. The line between exercising rights and inadvertently violating the law has become narrower. Supporters argue that these measures enhance public safety, reduce accidental incidents, and ensure firearms are accounted for in a responsible way. Critics, however, including myself, see potential overreach that could burden law-abiding citizens, create confusion, and inadvertently criminalize ordinary behavior. Courts would likely examine both perspectives carefully, balancing state interest against constitutional protections. Politically, this law reflects a complex environment of lobbying, public opinion, and legislative priorities. The passage itself is a statement on safety concerns, but it also underscores the tension between individual liberties and collective security. From my point of view, any lawful gun owner must remain informed, vigilant, and proactive in understanding these changes before enforcement begins. Ignorance will not be a defense, and compliance now requires careful attention to detail. The long-term implications are profound. Beyond immediate compliance, this law may set precedents affecting future firearm legislation, both in Virginia and potentially in other states watching closely. My legal opinion is that responsible gun owners who take the time to fully understand the law and adjust their behavior accordingly are most likely to maintain compliance without compromising their rights. Building on the foundation of the new law, let's examine how it will practically affect law-abiding gun owners in Virginia. While the legislation's language is technical, its real-life consequences are immediate and tangible. In my legal analysis, one key point is how the law redefines carry in both public and private spaces. For decades, Virginia allowed licensed firearms to be carried in most public spaces with reasonable restrictions. The new provisions, however, introduce stricter limitations on where firearms may be possessed, and in some cases, under what conditions they can even be transported. Understanding this distinction is crucial because a minor oversight, such as carrying a firearm in a newly restricted area, could trigger enforcement action. From a historical perspective, Virginia has always walked a delicate line between preserving Second Amendment rights and addressing public safety concerns. The state's past legislation focused on licensing, concealed carry permits, and the regulation of sensitive areas like schools and government buildings. This law, however, broadens enforcement mechanisms and introduces new compliance responsibilities that expand the scope of state oversight. In my assessment, this shift represents the most significant tightening of gun law in Virginia in decades. Constitutionally, this law raises important questions. The Second Amendment provides individuals the right to keep and bear arms, yet courts have consistently allowed states to regulate firearms in the interest of public safety. In my legal opinion, the interplay between the Second and Fourth Amendments is particularly critical here. The Fourth Amendment protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures, but if the law grants police new access or inspection powers, even without traditional warrants, citizens must fully understand their rights and obligations. Courts would likely examine any enforcement challenge by assessing whether the state's actions are narrowly tailored to public safety without overstepping constitutional limits. Practical consequences are wide-ranging. In my view, responsible gun owners should immediately review how they store firearms, where they are carried, and whether all relevant permits are up to date. Even minor deviations from compliance, such as inadvertently entering a restricted zone with a legally owned firearm, could result in fines, temporary suspension of permits, or, in extreme cases, criminal charges. The law does not discriminate between negligent mistakes and deliberate violations. This creates both an urgency and a personal responsibility for every citizen to stay informed. From a federal versus state perspective, this law underscores the limits of state authority. Federal laws provide baseline protections and regulations, but states retain substantial control over how firearms are carried, where they are restricted, and how violations are enforced. In my legal opinion, this balance will be tested as the law goes into effect. Individuals who fail to understand the nuances of state law risk inadvertently conflicting with newly defined state mandates, even while remaining fully compliant with federal regulations. Analyzing Supreme Court precedent, the Heller decision established the individual right to possess firearms for lawful purposes, particularly self-defense in the home. Yet the court simultaneously acknowledged that regulations, especially those that target sensitive areas or establish clear licensing requirements, do not violate the Constitution. In my perspective, Virginia's law, while aggressive, could be framed as a public safety measure rather than an outright infringement of rights, though this interpretation will likely be tested in court challenges. The legal landscape is uncertain, and those who own firearms must remain vigilant. Supporters of the legislation argue it strengthens community safety, ensures firearms are accounted for, and prevents accidents. In my legal analysis, their reasoning reflects genuine concern for public welfare, but it also imposes a significant burden on responsible gun owners. The law demands proactive compliance, constant awareness, and meticulous attention to both storage and transportation. Failure to adapt could result in legal consequences, even for individuals who have never posed a risk. Critically, the law's political context is essential to understand. Virginia has experienced shifting public sentiment regarding firearm regulation, and this law is both a reflection of legislative priorities and a response to broader national discussions about gun control. In my opinion, the law's passage signals a continued trend towards stricter oversight, but it also opens opportunities for legal challenges that could clarify the boundaries between public safety and individual rights. Lawful gun owners must prepare not only to comply, but to understand the potential for evolving interpretations. As the law approaches implementation, immediate actions for gun owners include reviewing personal firearms, ensuring secure storage, understanding new carry restrictions, and remaining informed about any state-issued guidance. In my professional view, responsible adherence to the law is not only a legal necessity, but a civic duty. Courts are likely to examine enforcement with careful attention to constitutional safeguards, and citizens who remain proactive are best positioned to avoid conflicts. Before moving further, consider this. How would you balance personal safety with strict new regulatory requirements? Answer in the comments below, because your perspective is central to understanding the law's impact on everyday life. As we step into the real-world application of this law, it's important to visualize the scenarios a lawful gun owner might face. Imagine walking into a store, driving to a friend's house, or moving your firearm from your home to a shooting range. Under the new Virginia law, even these everyday actions could be scrutinized if they inadvertently breach the revised carry or storage regulations. In my legal analysis, the law is not punitive for lawful ownership per se, but it establishes very precise boundaries. Understanding them is essential. For instance, transporting a firearm without following the newly defined secure storage guidelines could be considered a violation. Similarly, entering areas that were previously permissible but are now restricted could result in legal consequences. The law emphasizes proactive compliance, meaning that responsible gun owners must rethink how they manage their firearms daily. The reality is that in less than 2 weeks, these rules will go into effect, and ignorance will not be an excuse. There are also implications for federal interactions. While federal law protects individual rights broadly, state law controls the specifics of possession, carry, and storage. In my professional opinion, citizens who maintain both federal compliance and a thorough understanding of state-specific restrictions will be best protected. Legal experts are anticipating that challenges may arise, particularly around interpretations of constitutional protections versus public safety mandates. Courts will likely examine cases with precision, balancing citizen rights with enforcement obligations. Practical consequences go beyond legal risks. In my analysis, responsible owners will need to invest in secure storage solutions, review transportation methods, and stay informed through official channels. This law effectively increases the daily responsibility of gun ownership in Virginia. Compliance is not optional, it is a continuous duty. Those who prepare in advance, review their practices, and adapt to the law's requirements are far less likely to face enforcement actions. Politically, this law reflects a broader national debate about firearms, public safety, and constitutional rights. In my view, understanding both the supporters' rationale and the potential criticisms is vital. Supporters argue that stricter oversight prevents accidents and ensures accountability. Critics worry about the encroachment on personal freedoms and potential overreach. As a legal educator, my advice is to focus on education, preparation, and lawful conduct. The law will stand, and the best defense is proactive awareness. Looking ahead, long-term implications could include shifts in how Second Amendment rights are perceived at the state level, influencing licensing, carry laws, and storage requirements. In my legal assessment, this is not an isolated law, but part of a trend toward increased regulation, requiring careful attention from every law-abiding gun owner. Understanding these shifts is crucial, not only for compliance but for informed civic participation. Now let's bring this full circle. Ask yourself, are your firearms stored and transported in strict compliance with Virginia law? Could a routine trip trigger unforeseen legal consequences? Think carefully and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights can help others navigate these complex rules responsibly. In conclusion, the new Virginia gun law will impact every gun owner in the state. Proactive preparation, education, and lawful conduct are your strongest tools. Stay informed, review your firearm storage, understand the newly restricted areas, and follow the law closely. There is no substitute for awareness. Legal risks are real, but they can be managed through responsibility and education. If you found this breakdown valuable, here's what to do next. Subscribe to the channel for ongoing legal updates. Press the bell icon so you never miss an urgent alert. And in the comments below, tell us what topic you want covered in the next video. Your engagement shapes future content, and together we can ensure that law-abiding citizens stay informed, safe, and compliant.